generations living in a house all over the place. What?
He would not rent to me. Not only that, he also pulled James aside, who is non-native. He's white. Like organic, like from the center of America, like
So American.
white. Yeah. And he pulled him aside and was like, how did you end up with her? Like he was trying to like ask James how he ended up with me, like as his wife, which is really messed up.
Oh my God.
But the thing is that extended Native Americans, what we have in common is that they include not only our spouses and their children, and also grandparents and siblings of parents who we still call grandma and grandpa, people not related by blood. We call our cousins brothers and sisters, and also our cultural families are bonded through clans and ceremonies and cultural adoption and not through marriage,
right.
like other cultures. And so Americans have this interdependence within their network as opposed to the independence from networks as tends to be encouraged with respect to like Anglo-American nuclear family organizations.
Yeah.
And so we like to think of ourselves not only as individual people, but also representative of the entire family community and environment. And so even today, marriage is less of a concept than family, as I see it, like among my relationships with my tribe and my family and my friends who are native.
Huh. Yeah. And I totally like controlling that community, like that communal experience of life in Native communities seems to me like obviously it's a means of control. If you can't hang out with your grandparents, they can't teach you their language. And then they can't teach you all of their ceremonies. And, if you keep separating people, eventually those things will be lost. And that seems to me like clearly at least a large part of the goal of the Dawes Act, right? Just separate everyone and defeat them that way. And so it's very interesting that when did you say the Dawes Act went into effect? It was like
mid 1800s.
Okay. So I mean, I guess it depends on who you ask, because I know that a large part of the quote unquote Indian problem, as they called it, was that like that the native population was really, really hard to get rid of. And that was the problem in and of itself. But
so 1887.
1887. Okay, so that's pretty late, honestly.
Yeah.
But like clearly it seems to me that between 1887 and say 1945, 6, 7, whatever, they were like, the powers that be were like, hey, you remember that time that we told all the Native American people that they had to live separately, and then we were more able to control them than we had been before? Hey, you know what we want to do? We want to control the rest of the population. Let's tell them that they have to, if they want to be real Americans, they've got to do this too. Like it's a means of control.
Yes. So like I said, like
marriage is a means of brainwashing you people. That's the message.
Kind of though, but kind of. I mean, but like everything is, and that's kind of like why we started this, is to like talk about stuff like this. But like I said, in Indigenous relationship models where personal accomplishments tend to make them feel like they're more like enhancing their group instead of feeling like a better individual than the next person. Like even though like there's the concept of like the household keeping up with the Joneses or whatever. So like coming from like that background, I personally noticed the emphasis on nuclear family model most efficiently geared toward like earning and the consumption of goods, but it also pushed codependence as the wife and children were solely focused on having like a single breadwinner. Right. And so this in turn put a power structure into place, like exactly what you were just saying, where it didn't like put a power structure in place. It was created so that there was this power and structure put in place. So like the US is like, this is how we're going to control people. But then also you have like the breadwinner, the mom, the kids, the dog,
Right.
And so it created systems where it was seen as a privilege for women to work, and that kind of justified like the lower wages, because we don't have to pay them as much because it's such a privilege for women to be able to work in this.
Oh, right. Yeah. And they're clearly doing it because they want to, because if they're married, they have a man who could be providing for them. So,
right.
If they're doing the American thing and getting married, then working is just something that they want to do, not that they need to do.
Yep. And it also, as I see it, created the power systems for the patriarchy to hold onto their power by legal force through marriage. So much so that divorce is seen as a betrayal not only to the family, but as to the country by those who continue to uphold it. While to me, I see divorce as proof that the nuclear family is a huge failure to the part of the US. When I see like the numbers that it's happening.
So you agree with me. All right. I'm not totally out of the realm of reality here. But
no, I totally got remarried, but I don't necessarily agree with marriage itself.
Do you want to talk more about that, or is that like a little too far for the podcast?
No. We're talking about marriage, and I see marriage as a power structure. So this is why I have a problem with it. And so I see that like this power structure has helped to normalize violence as a part of marriage until recently.
Yeah.
Like spousal rape wasn't even outlawed until the 1990s.
Yeah, it wasn't even recognized as a thing.
Yeah, and even after that, the courts declined to try cases. Mainly because of 4 reasons that I was able to find like across several different like places that I looked into it. But like, first off, the courts didn't want to disturb families by dragging them through court.
Right. Yeah, because having a family where one parent is raping the other parent all the time is not disruptive at all.
I know, exactly. Exactly. Also, it's not okay to air your family business to begin with. And you actually touched on this earlier, and it was so hard for me to like wait until I got to this point to say it. Like even the way that the houses are set up, like I said, are structured in a way that you're supposed to like keep your family business like within like these boundaries. And once you're outside of those boundaries, then you're no longer supposed to like talk about what's going on.
Right.
And so and then also like mostly women, but like everyone was taught that spouses were supposed to forgive and forget. And so we're like actually indoctrinated since birth to overlook men's bad behavior. Like we are taught to do that. And so the 4th reason was that beating your wife was not just seen as too trivial to be worth processing, which it was, or prosecuting, which it was. It was seen as too trivial by a lot of people. But also, it was so common that if they had prosecuted every single case of a woman getting beaten by her husband, the courts would have been overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And so the reason why that bothers me as an Indigenous woman is because we have so many issues with MMIW and with violence against women. 1 in every 3 women has been sexually abused or assaulted. Wow. And most of these cases happen, by people who they know. And so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could totally go down the route of like looking at the ways in which Indigenous cultures have just been gutted, and like the things that have been forced upon Indigenous cultures by colonizers, like this, you have to be in a nuclear family now. You need to be living, by yourself in a house with this person that you're married to. There's less recourse. There's less resources available to you if something goes wrong. And for, groups of people who have been living a different way for a long time, and then it was literally just like stolen. Like, we're just going to pretend that none of that ever happened. Here's how you live now.
Right. Our relationship structures were stolen from us. And then not only that, they base the entire like American system of relationship structures on that abuse. And
Yeah.
so I have a statistic about
Okay.
like how about violence in marriages. They actually call like the worst kind of abuse severe violence,
Okay.
when it really should be called attempted murder.
Huh.
Yet for some reason, which is BS because this is entirely BS because something like 55% of all female homicide victims are killed by current and former partners.
Yeah, every time a woman is killed, they immediately look at the boyfriend, the husband, or
Right.
the ex as
Exactly.
the prime suspect until proven innocent.
Yeah. And it's messed up that being murdered by a spouse isn't an irrational fear here in America.
Mm-hmm.
We actually lost more women to murder by their partners between 2001 and 2012 than we did soldiers to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Holy shit, really?
We lost
Wow.
6,488 people in those years to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. We lost 10,470 women.
Whoa, that's a lot
to
more.
murders by spouses during that same time frame.
And those are the ones that we know about.
And those are the ones that we know about, absolutely. And also remember, like, that is like, we don't like, there's a lot of like people of color and especially Indigenous women who those cases are never ever reported. Even if they're reported to authorities, the authorities don't report them to like major sites, and so they don't count in a lot of cases because that specific area, if they counted it, would bring the numbers up for the entire state like a lot. So they like don't count that number or that area for this or that. So
oh Lord, that's a whole Jesus. I didn't know that. That's fucked up.
Yeah, I mean, it was like that. I don't know if it's like that now because I know that like there have been a lot of the laws passed to try and like get more of these numbers and research and finding people who were abusers and killers and stuff like that. So
yeah, good. I hope that those numbers and that idea is changing. But you know, one of the issues that I know faces that a lot of people who live on reservations particularly face is that they are very far removed, like physically, from the quote unquote outside world. And so it can be really hard for, even when laws change, for those changes to quote unquote like trickle down to people who are actually living on reservations when they're very, very far away from, you know, all of the resources that might be able to enforce said laws.
Right. And again, our like familial bonds are used against us in a lot of these cases where they're like use like the bonds of people who love each other to like make either don't make the reports, file any reports at all, or to make the reports go away in different ways. So including like people discounting what happened or like downplaying it to the point where it doesn't seem like as big of a deal.
And I mean, I think like a lot of that when we're talking about sort of the relationship between spouses, a lot of the time I think when there is like especially violent abuse happening, it goes back a little bit to that idea that we have been, I don't know, fed from everywhere that as women, it is our responsibility to make a man happy, you know, to like take his pain. And it creates a situation that's just ripe for abuse of all kinds. Emotional and physical and otherwise, you know, like keep him happy, make him happy because I'm, as his spouse, literally the only person that he has. So I must keep him happy. And, you know, when you're dealing with a spouse who is, you know, disturbed or violent or sociopathic or any number of things, if you are the one person that he is supposed to be able to rely on for his happiness, it gets very complicated it can get very complicated in like, you know, what do you do? Is it really your fault? Probably. If he's not happy, and you're the one who's supposed to make them happy, well, what does that say? And I think that a lot of abuse,